I want you to imagine something for me. Imagine spending 10 years of your life with someone, 10 years of mornings and arguments and inside jokes, 10 years of learning exactly how he takes his coffee, exactly which side of the bed he sleeps on, exactly what his laugh sounds like when it's real versus when he's just being polite. Now imagine finding a single piece of paper in a drawer you weren't supposed to open, and realizing that the man attached to all 10 of those years has a different name than the one you married. That's where I am right now, standing in my own bedroom, holding a hospital bracelet with a name on it that isn't my husband's. My hands are shaking so badly I can barely read it, and the worst part isn't even the name. The worst part is that some small, buried part of me isn't surprised. Before I tell you how I got here, I want to ask you 3 questions. I want you to really sit with them, because by the end of this video, I think you're going to be asking yourself the same things I've been asking myself for the last 48 hours. Question 1. What would you do if the man you married for 10 years wasn't actually the man you fell in love with? Question 2. What if the person he replaced was already gone, and he let you grieve the wrong goodbye for an entire year before you ever said, "I do"? Question 3. And if it turned out he was somehow a better husband than the man you originally chose, would any of it still matter? Would the lie still be enough to walk away? I don't know the answers. I'm not sure I will by the time this video ends. But I want to tell you everything, from the beginning, so you can decide for yourself. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Okay, here's how it started. If you'd asked me 2 days ago to describe my marriage, I would have used the word easy, not boring easy. Comfortable easy. The kind of easy that took work to build but somehow never felt like work once it was built. My husband makes my coffee every morning before I'm even fully awake. Light, with just enough sugar that I'll never actually admit how much I like it that sweet. He still opens my car door, not performatively, just automatically, like his hand forgot it was allowed to stop doing that after year 1. We have this ridiculous inside joke about a farmer's market vendor who tried to sell us a haunted jar of honey 4 years ago, and to this day, one of us will randomly whisper, "haunted honey," across a room, and the other one will lose it laughing. We don't have kids. That was a choice we made together, early and easily, and it never felt like something missing. It felt like more time just for us, which, honestly, felt indulgent in the best way. 10 years in, and we still liked being in a room together more than we liked being anywhere else. My best friend Paige used to tease me about it constantly. "You two are disgustingly happy. You know that?" she said once, watching him from across the kitchen island as he hummed something off-key while doing dishes. "It's honestly annoying. I need you to have at least one normal marriage problem so I don't feel bad about mine." I remember laughing and telling her we had problems, just small ones, whose turn it was to deal with the car's oil change, whether we were a beach vacation household or a mountain cabin household, the kind of problems that are really just proof that 2 people have built an entire life together. There was this one moment, though, small. I almost forgot about it until yesterday. It was maybe 3 years into the marriage. We were watching some medical drama, one of those hospital shows, and there was a scene with a car accident victim being wheeled into an ER. My husband got up without a word and left the room. When I found him a few minutes later, he was standing at the kitchen sink, gripping the edge of the counter, staring at nothing. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just needed water." I let it go. People have weird triggers. I assumed it had something to do with his brother. The accident, the hospital, all of it. I never pushed. I thought I was being kind by not pushing. I think about that moment differently now. But at the time, all I knew was this. I had a husband who remembered how I liked my eggs, who still texted me during his lunch break for no reason, who looked at me across a room the exact same way he had 10 years earlier. I thought I had the rare, lucky version of a love story. The kind people write songs about. Not that I could ever quote one to you, because trust me, once you hear what I found out, you'll understand why I can't even trust my own memory of the songs that were playing at our wedding. I thought I knew this man completely. I did not. To understand how any of this happened, you have to go back. Back before the marriage. Back before the wedding. Back to college, when I was 20 years old and had absolutely no idea that the next decade of my life was going to hinge on a mix-up I never even noticed happening. I met him at a campus coffee shop during my sophomore year. It was pouring rain outside, the kind of downpour that turns a 5-minute walk into a full-body soaking, and I ducked into this little shop just to dry off for a second. There was a guy at the counter who noticed me shivering and, without a word, slid his own scarf across the table toward me. We talked for almost 2 hours that night, about nothing important: music, terrible professors, the ethics of pineapple on pizza. He had this way of listening that made you feel like the only person in the room. I left that coffee shop with my scarf donor's number, feeling like something had shifted. Here's the strange part, the part I didn't think about again for almost a decade. I never actually got his name that night. We talked for 2 hours, and somehow, in the rush of the rain and the noise and the nervous energy of a good first conversation, I left without ever asking. I just assumed I'd learn it eventually. A few days later, I ran into a young man on campus who I was certain was the same guy. Same face, same build, same warmth in his eyes. I said something about the coffee shop, about the rain, about the scarf. He smiled, a little strangely. I remember now, but at the time I read it as bashful, and he didn't correct me. His name was Ethan. I dated Ethan for the next 4 years, and never once did it occur to me that I might have gotten the wrong guy that day, because why would it? People don't consider the possibility that they've mixed up 2 identical strangers. You just move forward. You just build a relationship on the assumption that the story you remember is the story that happened. Ethan was warm and steady, and endlessly patient with me. We spent our college years the way I imagine a lot of young couples do: late nights studying in the library, road trips with no real destination, cheap dinners that felt like feasts because we were together. I met his twin brother a few months into dating him, and I'll admit, it threw me for a loop the first time. "You're going to mix us up constantly," his brother warned me, laughing, the very first time we were introduced. "Everyone does it first." I remember thinking it was almost charming, dating someone with a built-in doppelganger, a real-life mirror walking around campus. I never mixed them up long, or so I thought. Both brothers were orphans. Their parents had died when they were young, and they'd bounced between a couple of foster placements before aging out of the system together, which I think is part of why they were so close. They'd only ever really had each other. There was no extended family to speak of, no parents to walk anyone down an aisle, no siblings beyond the 2 of them, no one who might have noticed, down the line, if something ever seemed off. I didn't know, at the time, how much that detail would matter later. By senior year, Ethan proposed. It wasn't extravagant. A walk along the river at sunset, a ring he'd clearly saved up for over months, his hands shaking almost as much as mine when I said yes. I remember thinking my whole life had just clicked into place. I had my person. I had my future. I had no idea how wrong I was about who, exactly, that future belonged to. 1 year before our wedding, there was a car accident. I wasn't there when it happened. I want to say that clearly, because it matters more than I ever understood at the time. I was out of town that weekend, visiting my parents, and I got the call from a hospital number I didn't recognize, a voice telling me there had been a crash, that one brother hadn't survived, and that the other was asking for me. I still have trouble narrating this part, even now, even after everything else I've learned since. I drove through the night to get to that hospital, and when I walked into that waiting room, the man who stood up to meet me, bruised, shaken, alive, told me, in a broken voice, that his brother was gone. I believed him. Why wouldn't I have? I had no reason in the world to think that the man standing in front of me, the one I'd spent 4 years loving, wasn't exactly who he said he was. I never saw the paperwork. I never had a reason to ask for it. There was no family left to question anything, no parents to demand answers, no other siblings to notice a detail out of place. Just 2 orphan twin brothers and the surviving one, handling every terrible bureaucratic detail of a death entirely on his own, while I was too shattered to do anything but grieve. I know now that the death certificate in that hospital's records didn't say what I assumed it said. I know now that the man who died that night was not the brother I'd been told. I didn't know it then. I had no way to know it then. I won't walk you through every detail of the months that followed, because honestly, I still can't revisit some of them without falling apart. I'll just tell you it was the kind of grief that rearranges you. I stood at a graveside and said goodbye to a headstone with a name on it that I trusted completely, never once questioning whether the name matched the man in the ground. The man standing beside me at that funeral, the one grieving his brother, the one holding my hand through every terrible moment of it, never once let his composure slip in a way that gave me pause. Looking back now, I notice things I didn't notice then. How steady he was, when I would have expected him to be the one falling apart. How he answered every question from the funeral director, from the hospital, from well-meaning acquaintances, without a single hesitation. At the time, I told myself it made sense. Some people hold themselves together for the people around them. I told myself he was being strong for me. 1 year after the funeral, I got married. I want to be very clear about something, because I think it matters. I believed, completely and without a single doubt, that I was marrying the man I had fallen in love with in college. I said his name in my vows without hesitation. I looked into a face I had memorized for 4 years and saw nothing but the man I had grieved beside, and then, somehow, gotten to keep. I had no idea that the man standing across from me at that altar was not the man whose ring I'd once said yes to on a riverbank. I had no idea that the man we had buried a year earlier, the one whose name I'd read on a headstone I visited every year on the anniversary, was actually him. The first several years of our marriage were, as I said, close to perfect. But I want to go back and point out a few things now. Things I only understand as significant in hindsight. Things that felt like nothing at all while they were happening. There was the moment at the kitchen sink during the hospital drama. There was a night, maybe 5 years in, when I mentioned an old memory from college, a specific joke from a specific class we'd taken together, and he laughed a half-second too late, like he was searching for something before he found it. There was the way he never liked talking about his childhood in detail, always redirecting gently, always changing the subject with practiced ease. None of these things registered as red flags at the time. They registered as nothing. That's what I think people don't understand about a good marriage. You're not looking for inconsistencies, because you have no reason to be. You trust the story you've already accepted. About 3 weeks ago, everything started to shift. We were at a work event, one of his old colleagues from years back. Someone named Miles, who used to work with him before he changed industries, came over to say hello. Miles looked at my husband for a long moment, confused, before saying, "Wait, didn't you go by a different name back then?" I could have sworn, and then laughing it off, chalking it up to his own bad memory. I remember my husband's smile freezing for just a second before he laughed it off too, made some joke about Miles mixing him up with someone else, and smoothly changed the subject. I didn't think much of it in the moment. People misremember things. But it stuck with me in a way I couldn't quite explain, this small itch at the back of my mind that wouldn't go away. Over the following weeks, I started noticing more, small hesitations, slight inconsistencies between stories he'd told me at different points over the years. Nothing dramatic, nothing that would have stood out on its own, but together, they started to form a pattern that made my stomach uneasy in a way I couldn't articulate. 2 days ago, I was looking for a spare charger in the back of our closet and found a small metal box I didn't recognize, tucked behind some old shoe boxes. Inside was a hospital bracelet, an old employee ID card, and a folded photograph. The name on all 3 was not my husband's name. I sat on our bedroom floor for a long time before I said anything. I read that name over and over, waiting for it to make sense, waiting for some innocent explanation to surface on its own. It didn't. When he came home that evening, I was still sitting there, the box open in front of me. He didn't ask what I was holding. I think he already knew, the second he saw my face, exactly what conversation we were about to have. "Sit down," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "And tell me the truth, all of it, right now." He sat. And then, for the first time in 10 years, He told me who he actually was. His name was not the name I had married. It had never been that name. He explained, slowly, carefully, watching my face for a reaction he clearly dreaded, that the man I had met in the coffee shop all those years ago, the one who gave me his scarf, the one I talked to for 2 hours, the one whose name I never got, had been him, not his brother, him. He told me that days later, when I mistook his brother for him on campus and launched into a story about the rain and the scarf, his brother hadn't corrected me, not out of malice, but out of a confused, split-second decision that neither of them ever quite unraveled or took back. And once I started dating his brother under that misunderstanding, the truth became harder to untangle with every week that passed. What was one conversation early on became 4 years of a life built on a mix-up nobody meant to cause. He told me he'd loved me first. Quietly, from a distance, for years, watching his own brother build a life with the girl he'd met in the rain. And then, the night of the accident, everything changed. He was the one who survived. His brother, my Ethan, was the one who didn't. He told me that in the hospital that night, in the most disoriented, grief-shattered hour of his life, alone, with no family left to answer to and no one to contradict him, he made the worst decision of his life. When the hospital asked him to confirm which brother had died, he gave them his own name. He let the record show that he was the one who hadn't made it. And from that moment forward, he simply continued being Ethan, not just to me, to everyone. There was no family to catch the switch, no paperwork trail that would ever be questioned, nothing standing between him and a version of his life he'd wanted for years, but never let himself reach for while his brother was alive. I told myself I was doing it for you, he said, his voice breaking, that I couldn't let you lose both of us in one night. But that was never the whole truth, and I think some part of me knew that even then. I loved you first. I never got to say so. And when I was standing in that hospital, I made a choice that let me keep you, and buried the truth right along with him. I told myself it would be different once we got married, he continued. I told myself I'd earn it. That if I loved you the way you deserved to be loved, the name underneath it wouldn't matter. I know now how wrong that was, but every single day for 10 years, the only lie was my name. Everything else, every choice, every year, every single time I chose you, that part was real. That part was always me. I didn't say anything for a long time. I don't think I could have if I'd tried. Because here's the thing that broke me more than anything else. I believed him. I believed every word of it. And somewhere underneath the devastation, I understood, with a kind of sick clarity, that the man in front of me had loved me first. Before his brother. Before any of it. He had simply never gotten the chance to say so. I left that night. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just packed a bag with hands that wouldn't stop shaking and drove to Paige's apartment, where I sat on her couch until 3 a.m, trying to explain something I still didn't fully understand myself. He lied to you, Paige said, when I finally finished. For 10 years, Natalie. That's not a small thing. That's not a misunderstanding that got out of hand. That's a decade of your life built on something you never consented to. I nodded, because she wasn't wrong. But a few nights later, sitting in her guest room, staring at the ceiling, I found myself doing something I didn't expect. I started going back through the last 10 years, really going back through them, moment by moment, trying to figure out which parts had been real and which parts had been a performance. And the uncomfortable truth I kept landing on was this. None of it felt like a performance. Not the way he showed up for me during my worst days. Not the small, unglamorous kindnesses that don't make sense as a long con. Remembering how I liked my coffee, learning the specific rhythm of my anxiety, so he'd know exactly when to sit quietly beside me instead of trying to fix it. Choosing me, over and over, in 1,000 small ways no one performs for a decade unless it's real. But Natalie, Paige said, on a different night, more gently this time, he never stopped being good to you. I know that doesn't erase the lie. I'm not saying it does. I just don't think this is as simple as villain and victim. I think it might be something messier than that. I didn't know what to do with that. I still don't, fully. I went back through old photos on my phone. Our wedding day, our first apartment, 100 small, ordinary Tuesdays that had felt, at the time, like nothing worth remembering, and now felt like evidence I was cross-examining. Every warm memory now came with an asterisk. Was that real? Was that him? Or was that a man playing a part so well he eventually stopped being able to tell the difference himself? I don't have an answer yet. I'm not sure there's a clean one to find. He didn't call me constantly during those days apart. He didn't show up uninvited, didn't beg, didn't try to control the story or rush my process. He answered every question I asked, honestly, even the ones that clearly cost him something to answer. And then he gave me the space to figure out, on my own time, what I wanted to do next. I think, in a strange way, that restraint told me something too. I went back to the house 4 days after I left. Not to move back in. Not yet, just to talk, really talk, without the shock and the adrenaline clouding everything the way it had that first night. He was sitting at the kitchen table when I walked in, the same table where we'd eaten 1,000 ordinary breakfasts. He looked up at me like someone bracing for a verdict he already expected to lose. I sat down across from him. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. "I don't know what I'm doing here," I finally said. "I don't know if I came back to end things or to figure out if there's anything left to save. I think I just needed to see you without the version of you I built in my head over the last few days. The villain version. The version that makes this simple. There's nothing simple about it," he said quietly. "I don't need you to make it simple for my sake. I just need you to know that whatever you decide, I'm not going to pretend I didn't earn every ounce of your doubt. We didn't resolve anything that night. I want to be honest with you about that, because I know some of you are hoping for a clean ending, a decision, a moment where everything gets tied into a bow. I don't have that for you. Not yet. Maybe not ever, in the way you're hoping. Here's what I keep coming back to, over and over, at 2 in the morning when I can't sleep. He spent 10 years being exactly the husband I always wanted. The only thing that was never real was his name. Everything else, the way he loved me, the way he showed up, the way he stayed, through every ordinary and extraordinary day of the last decade, that was real. Or at least, that's what I keep telling myself, on the nights when I want to believe there's still something worth staying for. I still don't know if I can build the rest of my life on top of a decade that started with a lie this enormous. I don't know if 10 years of genuine love is enough to outweigh the fact that I never actually had the choice to say yes to the truth. And I don't know if I'm supposed to forgive the man who may have saved me from being alone in my grief by making sure I never found out, until it was already too late to unknow it. I still don't have my answer. So I'm asking you instead. Would you forgive him? Would 10 years of real love be enough to make up for a lie that big? Or is some truth too important to ever come back from, no matter how good everything else was? Tell me in the comments. I mean that. I'm not asking rhetorically. I genuinely don't know what I'm going to do, and hearing how you'd handle it might be the thing that finally helps me figure out my own answer. If this story moved you, hit subscribe so you don't miss what happens next, and let us know in the comments. Forgive or walk away.